Starting this fall, several UW-Madison departments will offer undergraduates the opportunity to earn a certificate in aging studies. I'm Jill Nadeau. This is the Larry Mueller Show. And leading the certificate program and joining us in the studio is Jamie Goldberg. She's a clinical assistant professor in the UW-Madison Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. What would you like to know about this new program? Well, give us a call, 800-642-1234. And of course, you can send an email to talk@wpr.org. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we really appreciate it, and we appreciate hearing about this new certification program. Right off the bat, what is certification program compared to getting like an undergraduate degree?
So this is really meant as an addition. At UW-Madison, we don't have minors. We have certificates.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Yeah, so
okay.
Students across campus have the option of taking, there are hundreds of certificates that are offered, and it's really meant as a complement to their degree. And many courses can count double or even triple. So they could be taking courses in their major, and courses for their certificate can count.
That's neat.
As well.
Things have changed since I graduated, back in the eons ago. So, that's really great. So, the U.S. Census Bureau has said that by 2034, older adults will outnumber children under the age of 18 for the first time in the United States history. What do they mean by older adults first? And what challenges is that going to bring us?
Yeah, so the U.S. Census Bureau defines older adults as 65 plus. We know, however, that people are living longer.
Sure.
And we often look at that, we often hear that as a quote-unquote burden on the system, or how are we going to deal with this? And I would really like to reframe that.
I agree with you. Having at the 65 is coming up real close, and I don't feel like a burden. So.
Right. It is our responsibility as a society to care for everyone, regardless of age, and regardless of their contribution, quote unquote, to the system. We often think of older adults, if they're not working, they're not quote-unquote contributing to the economy, and therefore they're sometimes seen as superfluous. And I think a certificate like this really helps us to say, we see you, we see that older adults are living longer, and that individuals who are 65 plus are not a homogeneous group.
Not even close.
Not even close. And so if you think about, I actually teach this to my students on day one. If you think about the age difference between 65 and 85, that's 20 years. For many of my students who are in the class, that's actually their entire lifetime.
Right, yeah.
And if we think about the changes that happen from 0 to 20, there are many changes that happen from 65 to 85 or plus. And
yes.
I think we need to start thinking about older adults as a heterogeneous group with very, very different needs. I also wanted to mention, because I know you brought up the census data, we actually have new census data from Thursday.
Oh, from Thursday. Wow. Hot off the presses, people.
Yes, exactly. And that data found that older adults now outnumber children in 11 states.
Wow.
So it used to be a handful of states, and now it's 11. And the ratio of individuals 65 plus to those under 18 actually grew in every single state.
So how are we doing in Wisconsin?
We're not quite there yet. We're not one of the 11 states just yet, but it is projected that this is, as you mentioned, this is going to be widespread across the U.S. by 2030.
That's less than 10 years.
Exactly.
It goes really fast.
Exactly.
So what are the challenges then that you have to deal with and that the rest of us have to deal with?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, this is a heterogeneous group, and so there are so many different needs. In social work, we think about the life course. And what happened in childhood, what happened across somebody's life course really affects their older adulthood.
Sure.
So I had the privilege of working at the Veterans Hospital in Los Angeles for 8 years as a palliative care social worker. And I saw veterans who served our country and were experiencing premature aging because of their military experience. So I think that, that's just one example of how we need to really individualize care and think about how somebody's entire life course really influences their older adult experience.
Absolutely. So I'm assuming that we're going to need more people who are professionally, they're knowledgeable about all those differences in this aging group.
Yes.
So that's where your certificate program comes in, right?
Definitely, definitely. So I think that we often think about healthcare professionals, budding healthcare professionals,
Right.
and who are thinking about careers in, medicine, pharmacy, social work, occupational therapy, physical therapy, nursing, all across the healthcare spectrum. And apologies if I left anyone out there. Those are just some examples.
Sure. Yeah.
We often think about healthcare, and absolutely we need to train our healthcare professionals to be able to be attuned to the unique needs of older adults and to really look inside to think about their own perceptions, their own myths and stereotypes that they carry, to be able to get a real picture of what older adulthood might look like and what this person in front of you, what their experience is. And we also are looking at this certificate as an interprofessional and interdisciplinary opportunity. So it's not just all of those healthcare professionals, as important as they are, but it's really beyond that. We need lawyers who potentially are interested in elder care law, journalists who cover this really important topic, as you are. We think about engineers. Actually, my eyes were open to that when I was taking a class here as a PhD student in the School of Nursing. It was a patient-centered research course, and I was sitting across from an engineering student who was thinking about human-centered design. So the example that they gave, that they were studying, was looking at how we can keep medication safe while making it actually more accessible. How hard is it with somebody who might have arthritis to be able to open those packages?
Right.
The warnings on medications come in 2-point font. And so
yes, they do.
How can anyone read that and actually get the information that they need? So
I would think even architects, designers, anything like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we are thinking really broadly about the needs of older adults, and those are across our entire university, our entire population.
So then does that mean that all departments are open to this certification?
Absolutely. Okay. Any undergraduate student can do this. There are, we tried to make it very complimentary, as I mentioned, so it's 12 credits.
Okay.
And there are 3 options for kind of an on-ramp to the certificate. Either a psychology, a social work, or a sociology class that students need to take as kind of an introduction to the field of gerontology. And I have the privilege of teaching one of those classes. And then we actually have the requirement that students need to take some kind of policy or systems related class. Most of those are healthcare related.
Okay.
Being able to understand some of the challenges and opportunities within the healthcare system, and some of the barriers that older adults might face as they're trying to navigate that.
Now,
system.
you're at UW-Madison, but you have said that this is offered throughout the UW system?
Yes, okay. Yeah. So I absolutely want to give a shout out and acknowledgement to colleagues across the universities of Wisconsin, specifically at UW-Milwaukee in the Helen Bader School of Social Welfare. UW-Stout has a gerontology certificate. UW-La Crosse also has a gerontology certificate. So this is widespread across the UW system. And also, I do want to acknowledge that a certificate in aging did exist at UW-Madison years ago, much before my time. And we are so delighted to be able to bring it back now.
Well, that sounds very useful for everybody involved. What if someone has already graduated, but they think, oh, this would be great for my career? can they take it at this point?
Yeah, so there are a few options if somebody's still working and kind of wants to expand their professional development. The best way to do that is really through UW Extension or continuing education. This certificate specifically is open to undergrads at UW-Madison at this point. But I do want to mention a wonderful opportunity for older adults. So anyone 60 or older who is a resident of the state of Wisconsin can audit classes for free here at UW-Madison. And so as a professor myself, I welcome auditors. I know many professors across campus absolutely love having, they're called senior auditors in their classes. And as I mentioned, I teach social issues and aging in the School of Social Work. And I had 2 senior auditors in my class in the fall, and I just absolutely loved their perspective. They are offering their lived experience in a way that I can't.
Sure.
And the students absolutely loved it. When we did group work, they loved working with the senior auditors. And the feedback that I received from the auditors was that this helped them gain knowledge to be able to prepare for their own aging process. And it gave them hope that students who were sophomores, juniors, seniors in college were interested in this area.
Right.
And they felt like they were going to be okay and that they were in good hands with these students.
That's great. We're talking today with Jamie Goldberg. She's a clinical assistant professor in the UW-Madison Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work, and she's going to chair the new Aging Studies Certificate Program with an interdisciplinary team of colleagues from departments and schools across the campus, and other campuses offer this too. So call in with your questions, 800-642-1234, or you can send an email to talk@wpr.org. Hope you can stay with us today, because coming up at 11:30, we're going to talk to Dr. Rita German at UW Health about the increasing number of deaths from alcohol-associated liver disease. And then at noon, the weather guys are back. Excuse me, they're going to return to answer your weather-related questions. But right now we are talking about that Aging Studies certification. And before we go to the phones, I just wanted to ask you, Jamie, about where was I? Here we go. What are some of the common held? We talked about it a little bit about the myths and stereotypes about older adults and aging that you're really hoping to dispel.
Yes. So we often see, and I see this in my class with students coming in, they often admit that they're scared of older adults. They're scared of somebody being mean to them. They automatically assume that older adults are really bad at technology, that they are kind of boring and don't have any interests and don't have a lot to talk about. So the particular class that I teach, Social Issues in Aging, is actually a community-based learning course where students are required to volunteer as part of the course requirements. And they spend at least 25 hours over the course of the semester working with older adults, either at an assisted living facility or a nursing facility or an adult day program. Many of them are working with older adults who do have dementia, and their eyes are just opened. They're participating in activities, they're having in-depth conversations. They are often talking to retired professors who have so much to teach and so much to share. They're learning about the struggles, some of the struggles, often physical struggles, sometimes isolation and loneliness. Struggles with housing, so how to stay safe, aging in place at home, or transitions to new places, and how resilient older adults really need to be given those transitions. Thinking about transitions from driving and challenges with transportation. So they're really exposed to all of that. And in our discussions in class and our their reflection papers at the end of the semester, every single one says, I had no idea. I kind of thought of older adults as this monolith, and now I realize how individualized and unique and incredible it is to be able to spend time.
Sure. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. We do have a question from Martha in Menominee. Go ahead, Martha.
Yes. Hi. I spent years, taking care of my aging father, and switched. He was on a lot of medications, and finally switched over to a new, younger geriatric specialist as his doctor. And this person said something very profound. He said, "There's no reason that elderly people should be falling." And it seemed to me that falling down is what takes a lot of older people out of the picture permanently. Yes. So can you address what this program might cover in terms of preventing falls or helping the general public to see what a problem falling down is for older people?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. And your father is certainly so fortunate to have you helping to care for him. And I will say I am a social worker by training. So I'm not a physician. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a physical therapist or occupational therapist. So I can speak to this from kind of the social perspective. But to kind of answer your question more broadly, in addition to the on-ramp 3 courses and the systems policy courses, there are a depth of other courses that students need to take to get to that 12 credits for their certificate, and those do cross disciplines. And so there are nursing classes and biology classes and other kind of kinesiology classes that do cover more of the biological or physical changes that we see accompanying older adulthood. In terms of the social aspect of falling, you are exactly right that this often is such a challenge. And this is where we think about architecture or home modifications that can really help, pulling up rugs, making sure that older adults have assisted devices to help with mobility, doing exercises that can help with balance, and really looking at medications that can, and again, the caveat, I am a social worker, but I've seen this in years of being in healthcare, that changes in medications, there are side effects, and there are often, older adults are in the group of polypharmacy, so they're often taking many, many medications. And because of our fragmented healthcare system, sometimes different providers are prescribing those medications. And so they're not necessarily looking at all of the interactions. So it was so wise that you brought your dad to see a geriatrician.
Yeah.
There's a huge shortage.
There is, and that's something that this program is helping to address also. Before we go, I definitely wanted you to talk about the Wisconsin RISE initiative, specifically Rise and Thrive. Could you talk about that?
Yes. So we were so delighted in the aging studies community that the chancellor announced this Rise Thrive initiative. And it really looks at the life course, which I was mentioning before, really thinking about how we can't just look at individual pieces. We really need to look at the entire the entire life course. And so the hope is that with the Rise Thrive initiative that we'll be able to add courses that are focused on the full life course, and be able to really add to the breadth of the courses that we're able to offer.
And the objective of that is just to keep everybody healthier, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right. That's good to know. If someone wants to know a little bit more about that program, I'm sure they can just Google Rise Thrive?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the best way to find out. And same with the Aging Studies Certificate. All the information is online. If any budding students or any prospective students are out there, please feel free to be in touch.
Or if you have any students out there, let them know. They're probably, doing something else right now than listening to the radio. They don't know what radio is. I'm sorry. Was that a stereotype? That was a stereotype from a boomer. I am so sorry. You were talking earlier about volunteering. Is that part of the program too?
So one of the courses, one of the potential required courses is this community-based learning class
Okay.
that students can take. And we actually found that about a third of the class wanted to continue volunteering after the semester was over, so they got hooked. And anecdotally, we have seen that that students who might not necessarily want to work with older adults who are exposed do kind of get hooked once they're doing it.
Sure. What are some of the other I don't know if I want to say problems, but that people can expect with the older population as it ages?
Yeah. Just in terms of volunteering, I wanted to do another plug and shout out
go right ahead.
for there's so many different options for volunteering across campus that are not necessarily connected to classes. And so I just will mention one. There's Badger Volunteers and any program through the Mortgage Center for Public Service. Highly recommend getting involved there. And
So important.
So important, and really gives real life experience and that intergenerational connection if you're going to be working with older adults.
Yes, for sure.
And then, in terms of problems, mobility, we talked about a bit, falling, and then our kind of society is not set up so well for people who may be experiencing cognitive impairments or mobility challenges. How to get somewhere if you're not able to drive safely, and it's hard to walk to a bus stop.
If you have bus, I mean,
if you have
rural communities, obviously.
Exactly. And then potentially having to pay for cab service, let's say, that may take a long time, that may be unreliable. These are some of the challenges.
Sure. And I would imagine that some of the students, knowing this, will then be able to, in turn, hopefully help provide some of those fixes to those problems.
Yes.
So.
One of the activities that we do, we actually covered transportation one week in the course that I was mentioning. And I asked students to reimagine if you could start from scratch, and this is sort of the classroom piece that, if there's not a funding issue, what would you want? What would you want to see a transportation system look like that actually meets everybody's needs, or as many people as possible?
I love that. Well, Jamie, thank you for coming over and sharing your enthusiasm for this. You can feel it. I'm sure that the people in your classes absolutely love taking it. So thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Jamie Goldberg is a clinical assistant professor in the UW-Madison Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. She will chair the new Aging Studies certificate program with an interdisciplinary team of colleagues from departments and schools across the campus. Up next, Dr. Rita German, UW health hepatologist, will join us to talk about worrisome new research about the increasing number of deaths from alcohol-associated liver disease. Thank you. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of Americans dying of alcohol-related liver disease spiked, and the mortality rate continues to rise. I'm Jonah Joe. Thanks for joining us on the Larry Mueller Show today. Why are so many people drinking themselves to death? Well, we'll ask our next guest, Dr. Rita German, a hepatologist who leads a multidisciplinary alcohol-associated liver disease clinic for UW Health. Have you seen friends and family increase their alcohol consumption in the recent years? Do you wonder why or how you can help them? Well, give us a call, 800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. Dr. German, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is a big deal. I don't understand. Are you guys understanding what's going on?
Yeah, I think, this is not just a problem that we've seen since the pandemic. It's really been a problem for the last kind of 2 decades. And there were some studies early on that showed that over the last 2 decades, we've seen this increasing rate of alcohol-associated liver disease, really driven by this alcohol use disorder. We have tried to go away from the stigmatizing language of calling it alcoholism or alcoholic. So you'll hear me say a lot, alcohol use disorder. That's the term that we like to use because patients are people, and the disease doesn't define them. So it's a person with this disease. So we've been seeing these higher rates, and particularly and really scarily, we've been seeing these higher rates in younger populations. So 25 to 40-year-olds. Then we see patients come in with alcohol associated liver disease, even to the point of cirrhosis, dying from liver disease, in these younger and younger groups, where previously, you would have thought, oh, cirrhosis is somebody in their 60s, 70s, or older. But really, we've seen it younger and younger in this population. And really, it is correlated with this rates of alcohol use disorder. And that, as you mentioned, has really taken a jump since the pandemic. I think a lot of times patients were sort of self-medicating themselves during the pandemic, the social isolation, treating their anxiety, depression with alcohol use. It sort of became more normalized. It was kind of fun. Like, what are we doing during the day? Okay, let's just have a drink. We can have a drink at 12 o'clock now because we're home working, or we're stressed about the pandemic, we're stressed about childcare issues, kind of the normalization of it. And then obviously, our Wisconsin culture, you can't go anywhere without having a drink. It's just something we normalize. We talk about a lot. We have funny memes about it, like Thirsty Thursdays and things like that. So it's just this normal culture in America that has really driven these rates of higher drinking in higher quantities. And then that correlates with the rise in alcohol associated liver disease.
Although at the same time, we're seeing a lot of people talking about, dry January.
Yes.
There's mocktails. There's
Yes.
bars that don't offer alcohol at all. Is there some light at the end of the tunnel here that you're seeing?
I sure hope so. It seems like maybe the younger population has caught on,
Okay.
and they seem to be doing this a little bit better than maybe the prior generations have. I think that, while it may be a good turning point, I still think that we're going to keep seeing these high rates because it's just not going to be totally pervasive in our society. But I am really encouraged by it. There's stores that only sell mocktails and stores that only sell NA beers and things like that. So I do think that's taking a turn, and hopefully people are becoming more aware of the issue and working towards solving this problem. But I do think that unfortunately we're going to still see these rates of alcohol associated liver disease. But maybe maybe we can hope for the future.
Can hope. And the acceptance of people not drinking is probably a good thing to cultivate too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that that's very true.
So, how much alcohol consumption really can cause liver damage?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the NIAAA, which is the National Institute for Alcohol Abuse, really says that for women, the safe amount to drink in somebody without liver disease, so just a general population, less than one drink a day or less than seven per week. And one drink is considered a 5-ounce glass of wine, one 12-ounce beer, or a 1.5-ounce shot of liquor. So those are all equivalent to one drink. Anything more than that would really be more than a drink. So like a 16-ounce beer, 24-ounce beers, now we're getting into, that's two drinks.
Mm-hmm.
For men, it's less than two drinks a day or less than 14 per week. That's the safe amount. There are guidelines for binge drinking, so having more than 4 drinks in a span of 4 or 5 hours for women would be unsafe, having more than 5 for men. So it's a little bit lower for women, a little bit higher for men. But in order to get a liver disease associated with that, you really have to be drinking at much higher levels. We see patients who drink closer to like a 1.75-liter bottle of vodka a week, or sometimes, a bottle of wine per day. So that would be 4 to 5 drinks a day. So those levels would be certainly harmful to your liver and certainly can cause fats to develop in your liver, which is sort of the first sign of injury. And then over time, scar tissue develops in your liver and then cirrhosis. So really anything more than what I mentioned as the safe amount could be potentially harmful. But really, those higher rates are required to really get significant damage to your liver. The other good thing, though, is damage is reversible. So if, let's say, there is fat in their liver, even some scar tissue, that can be reversed with abstinence. And so we really encourage our patients to get seen, and if they are concerned about their liver, because there's still a lot of things we can do to reverse it before it gets too late.
So, what would some of the symptoms be initially for liver disease?
Yeah, that's the tricky part is there are really no symptoms, especially early on. The only thing you may see is some elevation in liver enzymes. You might see some fat in the liver, but that's usually found because they're looking for something else and they happen to do a test to look at their liver. So a lot of times this is a silent disease, which is why it's really troublesome because we usually don't catch it until it's too late. By the time patients have symptoms, and some of those symptoms might be they may notice their skin turning yellow, their eyes turning yellow, they may notice some swelling in their abdomen, but those are some late signs. And so, even when they develop those signs, some of that can actually improve significantly with abstinence. But we don't want to wait until it gets to that point. We really want to know much sooner than that so we can prevent getting to that point, essentially. But yeah, that's the really tricky part about liver disease and why it may be so progressive by the time they come to us is you just wouldn't know.
What does the liver do for us in our body?
Yeah, the liver is a vital organ. So the liver does a lot of things. It makes clotting factors, so helps your blood not bleed out. It also makes factors to make your blood thinner, so to make it so it kind of stabilizes your blood. It clears out all the toxins in your blood. It clears out all the medications in your blood. So if you're taking medications, usually the liver or the kidneys are the ones that clear those medications. The liver makes lots of proteins that are vital for your organs to function, for your lungs to function. So, I mean, it is a very important organ. And if it's not functioning, it's really troublesome. And we don't have something like dialysis, which we may have for the kidneys that can sort of replace the function. There's just nothing else that the liver can replace the function of the liver.
So what happens when someone does get to the point where they are looking yellowish, you know that something's going on with their liver? What happens at that point?
Yeah, so they're usually seen in our clinic, hopefully, or we see them in the hospital, if it's significant, and we really try to counsel, tease out if there's anything else going on. So the trouble thing is that, patients may have alcohol-associated liver disease, but there can be secondary causes as well. So we'll rule out other secondary causes, some genetic disorders that can cause issues with the liver. But the other big factor is that we're seeing high rates of obesity, right? So we have another pandemic epidemic is the obesity epidemic, and obesity and things like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, that can also put fat into the liver and lead to scar tissue. So if you have one of the risk factors, your progression might be sort of linear. If you have both of those risk factors, that progression might be kind of accelerated much faster. And so if they have these other factors that may cause their progression of liver disease to be much quicker. So what do we do whenever we see them in our clinic? First we tease out, excuse me, what's the main cause here, and what can we do about it? Then we tease out what's the degree of scar tissue in the liver. Is there just fat in the liver? Is there a lot of scar tissue? Is there cirrhosis? And then we try to treat the underlying process. So if there's an alcohol use disorder that's associated with it, we don't just treat the liver disease, we have to be really good at treating the alcohol use disorder. So we talk about medications that can help with cravings. We talk about referral to counseling for alcohol use disorder, giving them every single possible tool to make sure that they maintain abstinence and help heal their liver. And the liver, luckily, is a pretty resilient organ. It's pretty incredible. And so with time and abstinence, the liver can really recover significantly. So even fat can go away, even the yellowing of the skin and the eyes can improve, even some of the complications of cirrhosis can improve. So really it's not too late. It's not, to the point of no return. The sooner that we see these patients, the better, because we really can turn things around as long as they're sort of willing to work with us and make sure that we treat their alcohol use disorder, because that's a disease just like the liver.
Right. We're talking with Dr. Rita German. She is a hepatologist and leads a multidisciplinary alcohol-associated liver disease clinic for UW Health. If you've got any questions for her, please give us a call, 800-642-1234. And, of course, you can always send us an email, and that's talk@wpr.org. I've never heard of a hepatologist before, I have to say. Can you explain a little bit of... Yeah, I guess so. What is the discipline? What do you cover in your practice?
Oh, that's a good question. So a hepatologist is a specific doctor that treats the liver. So my specialty, whenever you're a liver doctor, you also go through GI training. So I've done training to be a gastroenterologist. So I do a lot of procedures like colonoscopy, endoscopy, but then I did additional training to specifically be a liver specialist. So what does that entail? Well, I see patients from all walks of life who have any problems with their liver, whether it's alcohol or anything else. We also take care of patients who may be undergoing liver transplant. So let's say their liver disease is severe and they need a liver transplant. So I take care of patients before and after their liver transplant as well. Now, I don't do the surgery side, so I don't do the actual transplant. Those are our transplant surgeons who are phenomenal. I just do the medical side of treating any aspect of their liver health, essentially.
Sure. What got you interested in that particular side of medicine?
Yeah, that's I get that question a good amount. So I really had some great mentors during residency, specifically a hepatologist who saw a lot of patients with hepatitis C, and it was phenomenal to kind of witness. So in hepatitis C, in 2014, there was new medications that came out to treat and cure hepatitis C, and that kind of revolutionized the field of hepatology. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're like discovering new things all the time. This is incredible, and it's kind of interesting to see somebody who has elevated liver enzymes really be able to do something about it, really be able to diagnose, treat, fix the problem. So I really love that aspect of my job. I love interacting with patients that have these issues and really trying to connect with them and make sure that, they know that we're here for them. We're really trying to destigmatize all of this. We're trying to talk to patients as if, they're human beings first, and then they have these conditions, and we treat those conditions, but we need to know that that condition does not define them as a person, and we are just here to help and not pass judgment, and really just to connect them with the resources they need. And that's really the point of that multidisciplinary clinic, that we have hepatologists like myself, we have social workers, and we have addiction medicine specialists in that clinic. And we all work together to make sure that we are treating every aspect of that disease to the fullest extent we can.
That's wonderful. We've got some calls coming in, so let's go to Patty in Green Bay. Go right ahead, Patty.
My sister developed liver problems after she started chemo, and she got lymphoma, and she got an antibody treatment, and then she got some chemo with that. And her liver just fell apart. But they sent her to a liver specialist, and he just kept accusing her of being an alcoholic and wouldn't listen to anything she said. And so there was nothing else that they could offer her. They said she'll probably need a liver transplant within the year because her numbers were so high. And so we ended up talking to an herbalist, and he said, after some research, he directed us to Spanish black radish. And she started taking that, and within 2 weeks, her numbers were down by half. And within another 2 months, they were completely in the normal range, and she because she stopped taking it for a little while, and their numbers went back up.
Well,
yeah. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go right ahead. I was going to say, go ahead.
Yeah, well, a couple things. One is that, yes, there are certain chemotherapies that can certainly cause liver injury. Absolutely. So there's something called immune checkpoint inhibitors, and we frequently see what's called immune checkpoint inhibitor hepatitis or drug-induced liver injury. So there's lots of medications that can cause injury to your liver. A lot of times with removal of that medication, the liver enzymes can improve. Now, in your sister's situation, obviously, I don't know the specific details, and I'm not sure why they thought that potentially there might be some alcohol use. There is a certain type of pattern we see with liver injury if it's related to alcohol. It certainly can be other things, but that's maybe why they thought that, because of a specific pattern they saw. But in case that this was related to the immune checkpoint inhibitor, potentially just removal of that agent may have improved the liver enzymes. I would say that, if you've had an opinion with a provider and you just weren't, fully satisfied with that opinion, it is always recommended to seek a second opinion. So you can certainly come see a different liver specialist, another provider, just to make sure that, they look things over. And, we see a lot of second opinions here at UW, and there's not a lot of liver providers outside of sort of major institutions because we're sort of situated around transplant centers, but we certainly do outreach clinics. So one of our liver providers, a couple actually go out to Green Bay and see patients out there. We have some outreach clinics. So again, potentially seeking a second opinion. The other thing I want to really caution about is herbal supplements. I know that there's a lot out there, but the problem with herbal supplements is they're not FDA regulated. And so you really have to be cautious about them, because while they may say, okay, this is going to help your liver, inadvertently, it actually may cause more problems than good. And there's not been randomized controlled studies that can show that, this medication or this herbal supplement has shown to reduce the risk of liver disease, et cetera. So I'd really, really caution against using herbal supplements without running it by your providers, because they sometimes can actually cause more harm than good. So I'm so happy to hear that your sister is doing better, but just be cautious about that as well, okay?
Thank you, Patty, for that call. Cara in Duluth, go right ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for taking my call. My dad he died from liver cancer, and when they caught him, he had NASH, but he wasn't a drinker, but he was obese, and I come from a family of big people, and I am obese. I've tried to be very careful of my weight and watch what I eat, but I'm still a big person. And for my height, I'm just under 5'1", and I'm 180 pounds. So I'm not tiny. But I know I have fatty liver, but my curiosity question is, even though I try to behave and my liver values are fine, I'm still concerned about heredity factors of liver disease, and that I may go the same route as my dad, and he wasn't a drinker. So
Yeah, so I'm sorry to hear about your dad. And you're correct that there is certainly a genetic component to this as well. So especially so you mentioned NASH. So that's what we used to call NASH, which is non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. We actually now call it MASH or MASLD, metabolic dysfunction associated steatotic liver disease. It's a mouthful. We call it MASLD, but essentially the terminology changed, but the disease hasn't changed. It's just a way to describe it better for what it is rather than what it isn't. So we used to say non-alcoholic. Now we say what it actually is, which is these risk factors that you mentioned: obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. So in patients who have obesity, there's certainly not everybody is going to develop fat in their liver, but MASLD is very prevalent. And we see about a quarter of the US population have fat in their liver. And it's very prevalent as well. Just like, we've been talking about alcohol a lot, but there's MASLD is very prevalent as well. And obesity can increase that risk. Excuse me. So when you have fat in the liver, with weight loss, with exercise, that fat can improve. And, sometimes weight loss and exercise just aren't adequate to get rid of the fat in the liver. There are some medications. There's one medication called resmetirom that was recently approved for patients with stage 2 scar tissue and fat in the liver from MASLD. But the other really revolutionary medications, and I'm sure everyone's heard about these, is things like Ozempic and Wegovy and Mounjaro, so GLP-1 inhibitors. And there's been lots of studies that actually look and show that specifically these GLP-1 inhibitors can not only help with weight loss, they actually can improve fat reduction and scar tissue in the liver. And so that's certainly something to talk to your primary care doctors about and see if you are a candidate for one of those medications. The tricky part is the insurance coverage. It's very expensive. It's hard to get them covered by insurance. But if you can, and if that's something that you'd be interested, that may be an option as well. But yes, MASLD is a very big prevalent problem. And obesity, if you already have fat in the liver, while the progression is quite slow, that progression still can occur where that fat turns into scar tissue and cirrhosis over time.
Thank you for that call, Cara, and definitely check with your medical providers for that, because that may help you. Rachel in Milwaukee, you are next. Go right ahead.
Hi. I was wondering if you knew anything about PANS, like PANS. There's also pandas. I have a friend that is an adult with PANS. He's 26. And I believe it has something, it can cause issues with the liver. And I was wondering if you knew anything that I could relay or things that I could do to help him out with that.
Can you say, so what did you say? It was
TANS? Yeah, TANS disease.
I actually do not, I have not heard of that. I'm not sure what that stands for, but
Yeah.
no, I'm so sorry that I'm not sure what that is exactly and how that relates to the liver in this case.
Yeah, sorry, Rachel. Is that something that she could tell her friend to maybe contact your organization about, that they could help out with that? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's concerns with her liver and her primary doctor feels that she should be seeing a liver specialist, they should absolutely send her a referral to our center.
Your center. Okay, sounds good. And we did get a question from Leah by email to say that the frequency that she sees of liver or gut detox ads all over social media, is detoxing a real thing? Is it a need, or is it just a buzzword?
Long story short, it's probably
Right.
just a buzzword. Yeah, there's no really need to detox your liver. Your liver is the detox center of your body. So the way to detox your liver is just to avoid alcohol, work on keeping a healthy diet, healthy exercising. Things like Mediterranean diet is really recommended. That has been shown to really help with mast cell and keeping fat out of your liver. And, if you want to detox your liver, coffee is actually great for your liver. There's actually, funny enough, there's been some studies that show that coffee can help reduce some fat in your liver. So 2 to 3 cups a day, go get your coffee. We're not talking about the fancy lattes, frappuccinos, okay, here. We're talking
Just
about some
coffee.
black coffee with a little bit of cream. But no, those detoxes really, you don't need to do that. That's more of a gimmick, and it kind of takes your money away.
Okay, I'm thinking there's a lot of researchers out there that drink coffee, because there are a lot of
Yeah.
studies that show coffee is good for you. I think that's very funny.
I tell people to stop a lot of things, but one thing I tell them to do is drink your coffee.
Yes, unless you have a problem with caffeine like I do. So no,
Yes.
thank you. But let's talk a little bit more about, the drinking culture that we have here in Wisconsin. It's very strong. What are some of the things that you're teaching your patients about this culture? I mean, it's not easy.
It's not easy. I think one of the things we try to work with our patients on is first figuring out where they are in their journeys. By the time, if they're seeing us, really, they have liver disease and they truly can't drink anything. There's no safe amount of alcohol for them to drink. If somebody is drinking problematically and are concerned about their drinking and their liver is fine, it is so important to seek out addiction medicine counseling and help, because they can help with figuring out the best way to work through that pattern of drinking. And, even if you maybe don't have unhealthy drinking patterns, even alternating. So let's say you're like, okay, I usually have 3 drinks a night. I really want to cut down. Have one drink and then alternate, have a non-alcoholic, and then you can have another drink. And again, this is for patients who don't have liver disease, but really trying to change that framework. And I think more and more people are becoming accepting of people that don't drink. And it's just not something you do. And I think that's becoming a little bit, hopefully, more pervasive. If you really feel inclined that you are going to be in a situation where you feel like you need to have a drink or look like it, you just get a club soda with a lime. Nobody needs to know.
Needs to know.
Yeah, exactly. So, but mocktails are really, truly becoming really on all menus at restaurants, at bars. They have all these mocktails. They have all these NA beers. The thing to watch out for the NA beers, that if you really shouldn't have any alcohol, making sure that you get the 0.0 NA beers. Some NA beers still have some alcohol, so just being careful with that. But it's tough. It's tough changing the whole culture. Sometimes when I tell my patients they can't drink ever again, they're like, "What about football Sunday?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, that still counts." We got to work on it, but it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. And I know I have a friend who stopped drinking, and he said that the new NA beers are amazing, and he really can't tell the difference. So
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Give it a try.
absolutely.
There's a place down in Middleton, Wisconsin here that's called the Sober Social. Not that I'm not advertising, but they have all NA stuff. It's just like, you can find it everywhere now.
Yeah.
I love it. It makes me happy.
It's much easier, much easier. And you had mentioned earlier that young adults are getting this disease more, but also there are increases in with women and American Indian populations too. So we got to go. That's what the music is telling me. Thank you, Lee.
Oh, gosh.
We're having
Yes,
such a
it's
great
true.
conversation. Thank you so much for being with us. We are talking with Dr. Rita Germain. She's a hepatologist from UW Health. Hopefully you can come back and talk to us again sometimes. It's been great.
I would
touching
love
you.
to.
Okay. And we'll be back right after this look at the news. Well, unless you've been living in a cave, which might not be a bad idea, the summer heat, you've probably noticed, is here, and our air conditioners are working harder than ever to keep us cool. I'm Joan Liddell. You're listening to The Larry Mueller Show on Wisconsin Public Radio. And back in the studio today are the weather guys. John Martin is a professor and former chair of atmospheric and oceanic sciences at UW-Madison, and Steve Ackerman is the former vice chancellor for research and graduate education at UW-Madison. Steve is also an emeritus professor in the Department of Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences. And you know, when you guys are on, my muscles around my mouth get a lot of exercise because of that, having to say atmospheric and oceanic sciences. I appreciate that, right? What questions?
You can just say the weather guys.
The weather guys, everybody knows. What weather questions do you have? Give us a call, 800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. Thanks for joining us again, guys. We really do appreciate it.
It's great to be here on this hot day.
Oh, yes, it's still hot. But it looks like we're getting a little relief. Humidity is going to go down. That's the hard part, isn't it?
I think it's the worst part, actually. I mean, the air temperature itself is usually not the thing that catches my attention. It's the humidity, almost always.
Yeah, when you're like walking underwater, when you're walking across the street.
Yeah.
So, for sure.
Because your body can't cool down with the high humidity.
Right. I was just going to ask, because it's evaporation kind of thing, right? Yeah. Well, how did last week's heat wave, which is continuing today, kind of reflect on the trends in here in Wisconsin? What's going on with the heat and humidity? I know you all take care of looking at that. So
there's a steady global increase in both air temperature and humidity, the amount of water vapor in the air. But when you have a local regional heat wave, it's mostly a function of circumstances of that period of time. It's not completely unrelated to what's going on in the background. That would be foolish to say that. But it would be almost probably more foolish to suggest that the fact we were 96 last Sunday with the dew point of 72 is de facto a function of global warming. Mid-June, we get that every once in a while here. And it's not surprising. We're not far from the Gulf of Mexico. There's a lot of water vapor that gets evaporated off that warm body of water. There's vegetation that's now starting to lose water by evapotranspiration at this point in its maturity. That all adds in to giving us the most humid part of the summer is from mid-June to about August 1. And, and then you get an occasional a situation in which you're very much warmer than normal, and they come along every once in a while. So, I'd say that.
What is a heat wave, Steve? I mean, how is that defined?
It's an interesting definition. I don't know if I'll get it exact, but it's along the lines of hot weather that's not abnormal, that is abnormal for that region, right? So what does that mean, right? Because what that means is what a heat wave is for Florida is different than what a heat wave is going to be for us up here.
Sure.
So one way they've been trying to track it is looking at, in terms of what's happening, what are the number of high temperature records and low temperature records that are being set.
Okay.
And so they're trying to look at what those are in trying to define a particular heat wave for a particular region.
Okay. Does it have to last a certain amount of time? And who makes that call? Does it matter?
I think there is a duration criteria.
There's got to be a duration, right? Because if it's, it's like John is saying, if it gets up to be 96 degrees and then it's 70 the next day, that's not a heat wave.
Yeah. There is a duration criteria. And I think that's also regionally dependent because, places down south, if you're 5 degrees over your average temperature, you might have easy to get 6 or 7 days in a row like that. Not so easy up here. And so I think in this region it's 3 days or something like this. Seems to be ringing in my memory.
Yeah,
3 days of a temperature, some threshold above the average for those days is considered a heat wave or something like that.
Okay, all right. You guys wrote a column recently, and if no one has seen your column, where can they find it, number one? John?
Oh, every Monday, Wisconsin State Journal. usually on page 2 through 4, somewhere in there.
2 through 4?
Yeah.
That's a big article.
Sometimes it's on page 2, sometimes it's on page 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it's never more than 300 words. We get yelled at if we go more than 300 words. So.
Okay.
And if you don't get the paper, we publish it on CIMS, the Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies. If you look for the weather guys, CIMS, CIMSS.
CIM.
Yeah, there'll be a link that'll pop up to a calendar, and it has most of our articles for the past few years.
Yeah, I think if you even just put the weather guys, it'll pop up.
It'll pop up, yeah.
It'll be one of those answers.
And
so.
if you have a question, send it in.
Please do, would you?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Because that's probably the hardest part of your day or your week is trying to figure out a topic, right?
Well, it's trying to fit it in is difficult. You got a lot of other things going on, and then you realize suddenly Steve will notify me on Thursday morning, goes, what do you think about this? And I go, damn it, he beat me to it again. How did he do that? I forgot it was Thursday.
Well, he has a little more free time than you do these days. Just a little bit. So your title, or the title of your recent article was called, Is There Consensus on Global Warming? Is there?
There is scientific consensus for sure. Scientists look, whether you're a meteorologist, biologist, oceanographer, it doesn't matter. You look at the evidence, you look at the data, and you look at the physics, chemistry, and things that go along with that. And I think the number is 99% of scientists recognize that global warming is real and it's being caused by burning of greenhouse gases, which we do through our human activities.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. We don't wish. Yeah. I think I would like to have summers that weren't as hot as humid, but wishing that and hoping that isn't going to help.
No.
It's what the data is telling us, which is important.
For climate change deniers, I always wonder, why would there be a conspiracy of scientists who want to tell you that that we're having global warming? Why?
One of the theories is, and who knows if it didn't have something to do with what went on in the first few months of this current administration, cutting budgets and whatnot. One of the theories is, well, all one has to do if you're an academic is write a proposal within which the word climate shows up, and you scare people, and suddenly you'll get a $2 million grant. First, nobody gets $2 million grants. The success rate on writing proposals, which all of us on this campus have to do in one way, shape, or form, not with respect to the climate, but something else, is on the order of 10 to 20%. So 1 in 5 approximately succeeds. And if you're at Wisconsin, because the scholarship and the group of scholars we collect here by our competitive interviewing process, it's probably more like 30% because we're better than the average place. And but even so, you're not any better than a 300 hitter on your proposals. There is absolutely nothing to the case that if you say climate in a proposal, you are, running on some gravy train. It's total nonsense. That's one of the arguments you hear over and over again. And I'm sure it's at the root of this waste, fraud, and abuse that Elon Musk thought he was finding in the National Science Foundation and other places.
Sure. You have anything to add to that, Steve?
It's kind of interesting because, as John is pointing out, that's one reason. What's interesting now is that the current government, if you have climate in your organization, they're not funding you.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of flipped around to actually, and this is actually happening because we have the evidence that says that. You don't have the evidence to support the claim that if you deal with climate, you're going to get funded. But we do have the evidence because we know groups that are not being funded because they have climate in their word and they're being told that.
Yeah.
It's
an interesting time that we live in.
It is an interesting time.
It is an interesting time.
And I guess we're blessed with that, isn't that? May you live in interesting times, isn't there?
Yeah, there's got to be an upside somewhere.
I guess I'd like to add the amendment, but in interesting times with other interested individuals.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's where we're failing
Not dismissive,
right now.
Let's go to the phones. Vern in Boyd has a question or comment. Go ahead, Vern.
Oh, hi. Yeah, a couple of things on climate. For one, in July 1936, from July 8th or 6th, we had 103 to 111 degrees, 104 degrees. It's been like almost 2 weeks. Okay? Now, in 1988, I did a thing on hurricanes. Okay, I sent it to Joe Biden in 2022. And the interesting thing is, Hurricane Helene, 1988. 1980 was a heat wave, a massive heat wave broken up by a hurricane. 2024, Hurricane Helene. History repeats. How do you explain the Dust Bowl days? Okay? That's before we had all this carbon.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
We moved here in '88, and I remember being
was hot,
Wisconsin was a hot, dry, in terms of precipitation, summer. Everything was brown.
yeah. Dust Bowl question's a good one. Yeah. There's climatic fluctuations going on in the background. There's also really bad agricultural practices that led to that. Constantly pulling up the native crops, which had long adapted to the sandy type soils in the plains, and supplanting it with wheat and corn was a big mistake. It was not an intelligent move. And the consequence was the soil was already prone to erosion. And if you throw on top of that an unusually dry period in the mid-1930s, that's the recipe for disaster, and that's what happened. And it was easy to reclaim it. Things came back relatively quickly once there was some more, let's say, more discerning farming practices were brought back to the plains. Things recovered rather nicely.
Okay, thanks, Vern. Don in Iron River, go right ahead with your question.
Hello. Say, if I recall correctly, a couple of years ago, you guys said you never heard of rolling thunder, but we had it up here Saturday.
So rolling thunder in terms of the sound of the thunder or in terms of the storm?
The sound of the thunder. It lasted over an hour and 10 minutes.
Just continuous, right?
Continuous. Correct.
Yeah. I've heard it a couple of times myself. We might have not been familiar with the term. I think that both of us have probably experienced things that have gone on for, tens of minutes, maybe even an hour, where there's thunderstorms. They might be training right to the adjacent to where you are, but not coming right over you, so you don't get the lightning and the rain. But you might just hear this constant thunder, and I know that I've heard that more than once in my life, and it's awe-inspiring. I love it when it happens. Did you happen to be in the middle of the rain, or just did you hear mostly the thunder?
Very little rain. Heard the thunder, but it's really hard to sleep.
Yeah, I imagine so. Yeah, and I'll bet you 10-1 that you had a line of thunderstorms that was just moving from southwest to northeast, individual storms doing that as one guess, and they were just to your west or just to your east, and so they didn't make much eastward or westward progress, so that they were constant companions, but not right on top of you.
Great. Well, thanks for calling in, Don. I really appreciate that. We've had a lot of that recently, haven't we? It seems like the storms are just kind of like in little strips, and they may hit you, may not.
And we just had it yesterday in terms of Madison. They were just north of us.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We had a little rain.
Little
I had
sprinkle. That's it.
But you could see it was really nasty.
Yeah,
to the
very
north.
true.
Yeah.
Very
And in a line. The storms
in a
just
line.
lined up.
It's kind of strange. We're joined today by John Martin, professor and former chair of atmospheric and oceanic sciences at UW-Madison, and Steve Ackerman, an emeritus professor of the same department. We like to call them the weather guys. It's just easier. Give us a call if you have a question for him. 800-642-1234, or you can send an email to talk@wpr.org. This is a Larry Mueller Show. I'm Jill Nadeau. We're talking to the weather guys today. And if you're interested in even more weather information, tomorrow on Wisconsin Today, they're going to talk a little bit more about the funding cuts for all the critical weather updates that we all rely on, and what could be at stake with those cuts. So tune in at 9 or again in the evening at 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, thanks, Lee. I knew you'd know that. And you can catch that. Always something interesting on that show as well. But guys, let's go to an email that we got from Pete in Kaukauna. He wanted to know what a waterspout would look like on an inland lake. He was at Pine Hill, which is Pine Lake, near Hiles, Wisconsin, on June 21st, about 8:15. Some thunderstorms came through. The wind was out of the south, very strong wind. They watched when about halfway across the lake, water just started lifting from the surface, going 70 or 80 feet in the air, probably a strip about 100 yards long. And after a time, the water wall just collapsed. He also saw a small area of rotating water, a cyclone, for a few seconds when it was over. And he's never seen anything like it and would love your comments.
I'd have loved to have seen it.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. And it sounds just like he describes.
Yep.
It doesn't sound like a tornado that went over a lake. And water spouts, they kind of start at the surface, the rotation, and then they get connected to a storm that's up above, like a storm moving in. It sort of sounds in my mind what he was seeing, because it just all collapsed, which means it got disconnected from the updraft in the storm, and all the water just fell out probably.
I think he saw exactly what he's asking us to tell him, which is a water spout on an inland lake. I think that's exactly what it was.
Wish we would have seen it.
Yeah, I know. I certainly wish.
Pete, where are the video?
And really good description of, you can see the water rotating when the funnel disappears and all that. That would be all consistent with that.
Yeah, and I love the fact that he has the exact time and the date and where it was.
Man.
It's like, that's great observation work, Pete. Thank you.
Never going to forget it, I bet.
No, I'm sure he'll be telling that story for a long time. We did get it. Now, here's a question from Emily. She emailed, apparently they're looking to replace their roof soon. I know this kind of goes over into the home improvement area, but how should Emily take our changing climate into account as they decide on how best to do that?
I wouldn't pick a black roof. So I think the main thing, in addition to wanting to make sure that it's structured well, and so that you're fighting the typical type of winds there or not, and losing shingles because of that, is to be reflective and certainly not absorbent, and that'll be good for the home heating as well, instead of just heating up the roof.
What about in the wintertime, though?
Oh, in the wintertime?
It does snow here.
That's true. It does snow here. But, global warming occurs in the summer and in the winter. And part of that is, again, our winters are getting warmer pretty soon. I won't say pretty soon. At some point, we may not have snowfall, and John will be extremely depressed.
I better be long gone by the time that comes. I will be very depressed about that. I don't know if that maybe... as secondary considerations, things that are a little more energy efficient. So, you can relate the maybe the urgency to acquire energy 30 years from now in a warmer climate could be a serious thing to consider in terms of what you do with your roof. If it's more energy efficient, you're making probably a good move for the future, but somewhat hard to describe all the implications, I guess.
Yeah. And Alice, why don't you call back with that question when we have one of our home improvement experts on? They probably have been getting, questions, and they're certainly, improving that kind of stuff. And that's the second Thursday of every month we have one of those gentlemen on with us.
And I bet the roofers have been looking at that too.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
And then the insurance companies. How am I going to replace a roof? What's going to be the request?
Right, and that's the first thing I thought about. It's like, you know what? We're getting a lot more fires than we used to too. So what you're using makes a difference too.
Sure
so
does.
it's a great question to ask because roofs are not cheap. So let's go to Maria in Madison. Go right ahead, Maria.
Oh, hi. This is so good. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to know, and I'm not denying the fact that there is a lot of pollution caused by us human beings, but is there something, is it possible that the universe is getting old? I don't know how else to ask that, but remember there was a Big Bang Theory, and, but is it possible for the universe, the planet, to get old? Or
well, it's definitely getting older.
What comes to my mind, I just read an article about there's a black holes and they're about to collide. Two black holes about to collide.
That doesn't sound good.
Right? But it's so far away. And maybe in astronomical terms it's short, but in our terms it's a long time. We are getting older. They just found, in fact, there's another article I read. I guess I must read a lot when I'm retired. But they just found the oldest rock up in Wisconsin.
In the Dells area, right?
Yeah, in the Dells area. Yeah. And that was 4-point-something billion years now. We know we're at least that old, and we are getting older, and hopefully we'll be around for another 4 billion years. But,
but I don't think that aging has very little to do with how the atmospheric composition has changed in the last 150 years. So that's true. That's completely a function of what we've done to it. And so it seems we have a responsibility to figure out what to do about it now.
And our weather patterns do back and forth, right, over the billions of years, warm, cold, whatever. But this is increasing faster, right?
Yeah.
So that's
right.
the main thing that People have to understand
it's the
that.
rate of change, exactly as you say, Jill. It's the rate of change over short periods of time that falls way outside the realm of the natural variability, which we have a reasonable measure of from other proxies of observation. So we're not in the dark about what the natural variability and the time scale of that is. And we know that in comparison, this is much more rapid and perfectly coincident with burning of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
It's hand to glove.
Right.
The evidence is so clear.
Yes. Elizabeth in Poignette emailed to ask, are overnight low temperatures trending higher? She feels like this is one of the biggest differences that she's noticed among many others with Wisconsin summer weather.
That is definitely something that is bound to be true. I can't tell you for sure that I know that's a fact, but I wouldn't be surprised. And the reason why I wouldn't be surprised is that the overnight temperature depends on, in the summertime particularly, how much water vapor there is in the air as the sun goes down. And if you've got a lot of water vapor, you can't get below what's called the so-called dew point. And with more water vapor in the air, the dew points are indeed higher, which limits how far down you can go overnight. Exactly correct.
Yep.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Because I usually like to open the windows at night and let the cool air in, but a lot of times there's not any cool out there.
Not recently, yeah. No.
Unfortunately. So hurricane season is here.
Yes. We're a month in.
That's right. What did you guys think about our FEMA director saying he was unaware that there was a hurricane season in the United States?
You know, it's,
you really want to know?
I mean, it's so sad, and it doesn't just go with the FEMA director, but some of the leadership that we have now, the ignorance in the field that they're in, and to me, RFK and vaccines is just another example. These are things you need to know.
It's one clown show after another.
Yeah, it's just there's just no reason that FEMA directors should not know about the weather hazards, whether they're hurricanes. We also have a heat wave season, and we're hitting it right now, and that's typically kills 600 people a year. So what? What are they doing if they don't know?
It's not an abstract idea because it really does affect so many people.
Right.
And I think the thing that probably I know it drives me crazy, and probably John as well, is that as scientists, we look at the evidence of these things. The evidence that hurricanes hit. Particularly, they hit Washington. I mean, they don't get to Wisconsin very often. We get the remnants of it sometimes. But the evidence is there that these things exist, and we've been studying them for a long time.
And making steady progress in forecasting them and forecasting where they're going to go and how intense they're going to be when they get there. These are things that are constantly being made better in a normal society. And suddenly, when you staff all these agencies with clowns, that really puts the progress at a halt. I mean, today was supposed to be the day that the microwave imager was supposed to go offline.
Oh, right.
And for no reason at all, the government's trying to maybe look nice. It said, we'll extend it for another month so you can have it through the month of July for hurricane season. And this is a great tool for looking at insides of hurricanes overnight. Most nights are about 12 hours long, give or take, in the summertime. And we can't see what's happening to the cloud elements and the convective elements within the storm except with these microwave images. And so for no good reason at all, except to show, as far as I can tell, except to show that we can do it, we're going to say no more of that for this hurricane season.
And hurricane season goes through November.
November 1.
Yep. So, extending it a month isn't going to really help. And they're doing that with a number of satellites that are really critical to seeing storms, predicting storms, tracking storms, and therefore improving forecasting. So we're going
what can that mean to people then?
Well, this isn't directly related to the satellites, but, the other thing that has happened is because of the cuts in the National Weather Service and in NOAA, they're not taking as much observations from the radiosondes that measure the atmospheric profile. And as soon as they stop that, you think, well, okay, let's see what's going to happen. But all of a sudden, forecast of precipitation in southern Wisconsin, there were time periods where, I don't trust it anymore, the 3-a-day forecast, because they don't have that observation upwind. If you don't have that observation upwind, then you can't capture it in your models. And so, it went from, it used to be, in the Biden era, I use that phrase, sorry about that. Previously with the National Weather Service forecast, and when they're making those observations, I would be very happy to look at 5-day forecasts. It took a while to get there. I don't look at them anymore. I mean, it's just you don't have the data upstream to be
So what
as
does
accurate.
that mean to us, everyday people trying to go about your lives? What is that going to mean to us or could happen?
Can I address the hurricane satellite thing first and then get back to that?
Sure.
Rapid intensification of these hurricanes sometimes occurs right as before they make landfall. Wilma did in 2005. It was one of the strongest storms of all time, and it developed in almost no time at all. I forget the name of the one just 2 summers ago that was quite like that. And so people are preparing for a Category 1 or a Category 2 storm. They make precautions for that. But if you don't know that a Category 4 storm is on your shoreline, when you wake up the next morning, that's a serious problem for you and your evacuation plans and everything else. So that's one thing about the satellites. But the broader question, what does it do for all of us? I think we've all been nurtured in an environment that's increasingly accurate with respect to weather forecasts. We can look at our phone and have confidence that even in the summertime, you can paint the complexion of the day 5 days out and have some sense of what you might want to do about whatever your schedule might suggest you have to do. Public safety has gotten increasingly more and more guided by weather forecasts. As they get downgraded, everything about public safety and commerce surrounding people's schedules will be degraded as well. And it's inevitably going to cost lives. There's just no question that will be the case. Being able to be certain about this person's life was lost because of this budget cut is going to be an impossible problem. But the general complexion of pulling back on our skills and our abilities for the sake of saving a few dollars will definitely cost lives. It probably already has, but it certainly will. And then hurricane season, it's going to cost a lot more.
Yeah.
Does it look like we're going to have a very active hurricane season this year?
I think the forecast in the spring was for an unusually active, maybe not at the highest level, but
Okay.
that
More
gets
than
updated.
normal.
Yeah, that gets updated frequently during the season.
Well, we had the first one, right?
Yes, I forget the name of
Andrea.
it. Andrea, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So they're coming.
They're
They're coming. We have a season. The season has begun.
They're always coming during that season, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take, first of all, if you have a question for the weather guys, we've got open lines here, guys. 800-642-1234. That's 800-642-1234. You can send an email to talk@wpr.com. And Wendy emailed us to say that the discussion of rolling thunder made her think about when we get lightning that is just constant and flashing nonstop for long periods of time. She thinks it was called heat lightning. Her daughter was at the family cabin on the lake when this happened recently, and no one, of course, could sleep. Can you explain what causes this, and also, is it dangerous?
It's less dangerous. I'm going to be obnoxious here. It's less dangerous than lightning when you can hear the thunder.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Because that means it's closer.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, heat lightning is, as she was being described there, you can see the lightning in the storm, but you don't hear the thunder. The thunder is occurring. It's just propagating away from you. Sometimes the air stream, instead of keeping it along the ground, the thunder sound wave, which is thunder, will travel upward.
Okay.
And sometimes it'll come back down. So sometimes you'll have these silent zones where you won't hear the thunder, and then a couple of miles down upwind or downwind, you will hear the thunder.
That's really weird. Yeah, that's weird.
That's weird. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So the rolling thunder is probably caused by roughly the same thing, except the storms that are generating, in this case, the lightning, you can't hear the thunder, is just closer.
Sure.
So you can hear it, more likely hear it, but it's just not hitting you.
Yeah, so heat lightning, it really isn't a thing that's separate from regular lightning?
Nope, it's just regular lightning.
It's just where you're looking at it.
It's, and it's a great thing to see. I think you typically see it, at least I usually see it in the evening.
And I think it gets its name because it's going to happen at the time of year where you have this heat and humidity we're experiencing right now. It just might not, it's just that the thunderstorm or the line thereof is not on you. It's quite far away.
Okay.
And you see the effects of some of it, the light you can see, you can't hear the sound.
Oh, excellent.
Now, just to be clear, while I do watch it, I wouldn't recommend taking a metal chair and sitting outside. Because we do have things called lightning strokes out of the blue. And so you can have a lightning bolt come out of the top of a cloud, and even though it's not raining by you, and it even could be clear, you might get hit by lightning in your area.
You don't want to play with it.
You don't want to play with it.
Right. Well, related to this, Louise in Dodgeville has a question. Go right ahead, Louise.
Hi, I was talking with my husband last night about thunder, and it's just so common. You don't think of the physics of it and what's actually happening to create the sound. So I was wondering if you could explain it. And then we've had a lot of really good rain recently, so just wondering if you have an idea if July and August will continue, if you have an early forecast. I think last summer it rained a lot early, and then it got really dry as the summer went on.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll do the thunder part and let John do the forecast. But yeah, the thunder is always associated with lightning bolts, or lightning, I should say, always generates thunder. Lightning, I think, is the temperature of that electric discharge is like this temperature of the sun. And it's only a few inches thick, like the fork lightnings that we see as an example. And so the air there gets rapidly heated. And once you heat air, it's going to expand because it's rapidly heated. It expands rapidly, and that's what generates the thunder, or basically a sound wave. And that's why we hear it. And then it reverberates, and so it's sometimes also with the rolling, it be hitting buildings and things or other clouds, and so it makes it sound like it's going on for a longer time.
Yeah. And what's the relationship between thunder and lightning as far as how far away is it? Because it's like the lightning strikes and then you count.
Oh, yeah. I forget the rule. It's something, I think every 7 seconds is a mile or something like that.
6 seconds a mile,
I thought it was 5. But,
maybe it's 5. Somewhere in that range, below 10.
Okay, sorry. Just wanted to clear that up.
If you only get to 1,000, then you're
in trouble.
You're close.
In fact, that's what I always say to myself. If I can count to 2, I don't want to go anywhere outside. It's too scary.
Okay, and go ahead, John.
For the forecast, the last time I looked at the Climate Prediction Center's outlook, and they give a 30 and 60 and a 90-day outlook, I think they have the least confidence of the whole year they have in the summertime, because the nature of the storms that bring you rain are very short life cycles. They might live a couple of hours maximum, sometimes as much as 12 or 24, but they're not organized as often as they are in the cold season with migrating storms that you can track across the country for 4 or 5 days. And so I think the last time I looked, I think we were looking at about a 50% probability of just as wet or wetter than normal. So that pretty much means they can't make any discernment about what's coming in the next couple of months. Although the call is right. Last May and June, especially in southern Wisconsin, very wet, and then suddenly the coin flipped over entirely and was dry the rest of the summer. So, that's probably more like the kind of summer that you usually get. You don't usually get 3 straight months of heavy rain during the summertime. So I guess if I had to make my own forecast, I'd bias it toward drying out as we go through July and August. When exactly, I don't know.
Okay, great. I guess I'm going to have to start watering more.
Yeah, I know. That's right. You have to do that.
Thanks, Louise. Appreciate it. Gary in the town of Wien, go right ahead.
Thank you for your great show. I'm a listener all the time. And thank you to your 2 guests for speaking the truth. It is so frustrating. I've been following the issue of a warming climate since Dr. Hansen, I believe his name was, spoke to the Senate and talked about it. And then I have just personal observations and reading articles trying to understand it. I think if your guests know anything about the old Know Nothing Party in the United States, well, we have the new Know Nothing Party, and they're making these decisions based on ignorance or indifference. My favorite T-shirt I have says science, because figuring things out is better than making stuff up.
That's right. It's more fun, too.
That's right.
It's very easy to make things up.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gary. Appreciate those kind words. Glenn in Glen Arbor, Michigan, go right ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I heard the earlier caller's story about the water spout on one of the inland lakes, and I was thinking about the behavior of the things. I've watched a few come and go, and the amount of water they pick up, you've got this column of, it's not spitting air or 2x4s. It's just water, but the mass that thing is picking up, the way that they shut down, and the ones that I saw were kind of straw-shaped, actually, really wild looking.
And they're composed of droplets, which also I find really interesting. I don't know what the size of those droplets are or what the distribution of sizes is.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's probably less water mass than it looks because, when there's a bunch of droplets, they're going to scatter the light and everything looks white. It's like a white tornado. So you can't see through it and you don't know how much there is. The really big ones, though, can pick up fish, I've heard.
Oh, right.
And deposit them somewhere else. So they're stronger vortices, I assume, to be able to do that. The ones on the inland lakes may be a little bit weaker than that, but no less dramatic to see, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Are these ever big enough to be caught on satellite imaging?
I don't know about that. I kind of would doubt it.
I don't think, because I think eventually they have to get coupled with a storm, a thunderstorm. And it's probably not a severe thunderstorm, so you won't have the overshooting tops, so you probably wouldn't be able to identify them. They can get picked up on radar, though, ground-based radar.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Glenn. Great. Appreciate that question. Next up is Eric in Portage. Go right ahead, Eric.
Hi, I was wondering what you could tell me about ball lightning. In 2015, I was working in central Iowa, and I seen like a ball of electricity go right horizontally across in front of me.
That's a really interesting phenomena. I don't think they've figured it out yet, what actually causes it. But it's sort of like what you're describing. It's just a ball of lightning, a lit up ball that just floats around.
Goes through keyholes, I've heard, and stuff like this.
It just goes through walls and things. So it's not, that's what I mean. I think a lot of people, lightning experts, are still trying to figure out what actually causes it.
I think it's wizards.
Yeah,
I believe
it's Harry Potter lightning or something.
Right.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that. With us today are John Martin, professor and former chair of atmospheric and oceanic sciences at UW-Madison, and Steve Ackerman, an emeritus professor of atmospheric and oceanic sciences. Please give us a call if you have a question for them, 800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. And this is the Larry Mueller Show. I'm Jill Nadeau. Tomorrow on the show, we'll talk about the new book, Baseball Like It Ought to Be. It's about the history of the Madison Mallards. And then we're going to talk about disc golf and competitive water skiing. That's all tomorrow on the Larry Mueller Show. Looking forward to that. I'm sure Larry should be back by then. But right now, we are talking about the weather. Our lines are full, so let's go right over there to Virginia in Madison. Go right ahead.
Hello. I live in Madison and grew up here. I'm not widely traveled, but I now have a neighbor who lived in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. She tells me there's quite a difference between the clouds here and the clouds in Pennsylvania. What would make that happen?
I think Bucks County's got some of the Appalachians in it, I think. There might be some mountain clouds that are different. We don't see them around here very much, and they look like they're sort of flying saucer. They're called lenticular clouds. You can sometimes see those in places probably like Bucks County.
Probably lee wave clouds, too.
Yeah, lee waves off the mountain. So there might be
rows of clouds.
Some of the differences might come from the category of just being closer to higher terrain. But I don't know about any other differences besides that.
The only difference I can think of is that if they're in a mountainous region, they're not going to have that open sky that we have
right.
down here. I mean, it's not as open as Colorado where we used to live, but you could see more of the sky, and so you're probably seeing cloud structures that look differently.
Along those lines, when you see a giant cumulonimbus in the summertime in a place with a broad open sky, it looks different. It looks more impressive than it does when you see just a fraction of it. If it's
you can see the whole structure with the anvil and
So some of the differences may not actually be differences, just differences in perception. But there may also be some real differences. Yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I've noticed that now I lived in the UP for when I was growing up, and the sky down here is definitely different feeling, looking. I could pick out a Wisconsin summer sky out of a bunch of pictures. I'm not sure what it is about it. The clouds just seem taller. The blue sky is bluer. I don't really know what the difference is, but I understand what they're kind of saying.
Yeah.
So
Well, we've had this long-standing little theory we wanted to try out, one of my colleagues and I. If you could take out the foliage when you look at the horizon,
Sure.
and then just say, what time of year does this sky look like? Most people have a sense of that.
Oh, yeah.
I think they would have a lot of congruence in people's answers.
Definitely.
So we pay attention to it subconsciously, some of us consciously, some both, more than we probably think we do.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's because I have art background, because I notice light a lot. But yeah, you can always tell. It's like once in a while in the fall, you're like, oh, that's like a summer light day.
Isn't
right?
it? Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the other way around sometimes. Yeah.
Yep. Steve, you'll just have to start observing more.
I look a lot, but
he's just too stuck on this retirement thing.
Apparently. Well, speaking of Colorado, we have Dean in Evergreen on the line. Go right ahead, Dean.
Hi guys. Thanks for taking my call. I had a career in meteorology and 40 some plus years, and retired a while ago. I was wondering, as I look back on my travels, what do you guys see as future developments? Where's the frontier in meteorology? Let me put it that way.
Boy, that's a good question. And I guess I would have to look at the polar regions, the changes that are occurring because of global warming induced by greenhouse gases that humans eject. As those glaciers, snowfields go away, what's going to happen to the weather patterns? Because they will affect terrain as well. I mean, when the Greenland ice sheet, this is many years from now, but when that evaporates and goes away, that landmass that underneath is going to come up. And how high is that going to be? And how's that going to affect the ocean circulations?
Yeah, for different reasons, I think I'd agree with Steve. If I had to put one thing down on the table, it would be understanding the interaction between the polar latitudes and the extratropical latitudes better than we do right now. We've recently discovered that there are some, especially in the cold season, but not exclusively in the cold season, there are these things called tropopause polar vortices that are formed by cooling at cloud top in the Arctic. And they can last all winter long, these little vortices that go around the whole hemisphere several times before they finally dissipate. Sometimes they dissipate because the sun comes back up. Sometimes they get ejected into the middle latitudes and contribute to developments there. But we don't really understand that set of vortices very well, nor its interactions with the middle latitudes, particularly, as I say, in the cold season. And I think it has something to do with or it contributes to forecast inaccuracy, periods where we can't really trust the forecast in the winter. And so I'd say that's one place, sort of a foundational level of new understanding that might be developed in the next 20 or so years that could have a lot of implications for short-term forecast accuracy.
Do you think that affects mid-latitude cyclones?
Yes, definitely it does.
Wow.
We just don't know exactly how in a systematic way. And I think it affects the transition from the winter to the spring, because not every spring in the Northern Hemisphere is the same. Some are really stormy and some are very placid. And I think it has to do with the supply of those beasts at the high latitudes in the wintertime.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. Dean, thank you so much for
for
spurring this great conversation. Let's go to Jan in Madison next. Go right ahead, Jan.
Hi. My question is probably unanswerable, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If we were to, say, by 2030, stop the growth in worldwide temperature, how long would it take to reverse that trend and get us back to where we were, say, 150 years ago? And I'm thinking, how many centuries would that be?
Yeah.
It's an answerable question because I think we looked at that in the 90s, early 2000s. If you were to stop greenhouse gas emissions, how long? So running climate models is what you would do. How long would it take to get back to what we were, in the 1950s?
I would guess it's more than a century because it's the residence time of carbon dioxide molecule in the atmosphere is somewhere between 50 and 100 years, we think. Same with methane. And so if you put it in there in an artificial way, that is from burning fossil fuels, it takes that long for it to come out. And so all of the excess that we've contributed over the last 100+ years is going to take some time to rain out. of the atmosphere. And I don't mean that it'll come out in rain, but just to come out of the atmosphere. And so if we stop adding more right now, it seems to me it takes us about 100 years to get rid of all that excess. And having a 5-year turnaround time to absolutely stop adding new carbon dioxide to the atmosphere is probably overly optimistic. So it's going to be longer than that even. But we maybe don't have to get back to 1850. I mean, that's another thing to keep in mind. We maybe don't have to get all the way back there. The carbon dioxide fraction was around 320 parts per million in 1958 when we started taking observations every day on the top of Mauna Loa in Hawaii. If we could get back there, which is way above what it was in 1850, we'd probably still be making a big dent in all of the climate change.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan. So we want to kind of try to end each of our episodes with you both with a new weather term.
Oh.
Because there's so many unusual weather terms out there. So the one that we picked out was seiche. Are you familiar with it? And for those who aren't, it's spelled Seiche. And between the June 20th and the 22nd, it occurred on Lake Superior. What is it and what caused it?
It's a fascinating thing because it occurs a lot on Lake Erie. And I went to school upstate New York, and so was aware of it. But what it is, you have a strong wind, steady, strong wind over a lake. And so you can imagine water moves. If it's steady from the same direction, it'll push all that water on one side of the lake. And so we just saw this, as you're saying, in June in Lake Superior. So along the shoreline, where the wind is hitting the shoreline and then pushing the water away, all of a sudden the water level will drop, and in some cases just go and be bare ground or bare shoreline. And then eventually the storm system moves on. And once that happens, all that water that's piled up on the other shoreline comes sloshing back. And that can slosh back a couple of times, depending on what the lake is. And you get it a lot in Lake Erie because I think you could observe it a lot. One, because it's shallower, but then also the orientation and the shape of the lake also seems to encourage seiches to occur.
I'd guess they're more rare on Superior because it's so deep.
Yeah.
But maybe if you've got inlets on the coast or something that are maybe funnel shaped or something, you would have.
And this was
some
in a
of these
bay,
effects.
right?
I don't know the exact
I'm not going to
place
try
where
and
it
pronounce
was.
Makwakin Bay or whatever it is.
That's
That's a great name.
Yeah.
So does that cause problems with shipping and boating and things like that when that happens? Or is it just kind of a subtle thing?
I think, definitely for boating, kayakers and things like that. I think in many of the shipping lanes, they're going to be deep enough that probably not as much of an issue.
Yeah, it's pretty rare, like you said, unless you're on Erie, where it's a little
the shallower lakes it isn't. So
well, that makes. I had never heard of it before, so
I only heard about it through affiliation with this program, but it was many years ago, and Steve knew it right off the top of his head.
Okay, wow, interesting. Well, I didn't know we were repeating ourselves, but excellent.
And we've been on air since a long time.
So if anybody has a term that they would like the guys to define, please send it to us. You can send an email to talk@wpr.org. So we've got Roger in DeForest who has a story about a tornado. Roger, we need to make it short. Go ahead.
Yeah, short story. Douglas, Vilas County, we vacation up there every year because my mother had allergies to hay fever, ragweed pollen. My dad would come up for a week. He had 2 weeks vacation, and we went on a little 11-foot resorter boat, aluminum boat on Tower Lake in northern Vilas County. And it got dark and all of a sudden real still. And then we could hear something like a freight train, and we were sitting in the boat fishing, and small tornado funnel cloud came across the top of the popples and aspen, went over the top of us, went down into the lake and started sucking up water, tons and tons of water being sucked up into this vortex. And all of a sudden it got so heavy with all the water that it all blew apart. And the little tornado, the mini tornado, just went down, and branches the size of your leg, leaves, tons of leaves and weeds and water came down into the lake. And my dad was scared
All right. Well, thank you, Roger.
Pretty awesome.
We need to make that short.
I would be scared too.
Yeah, I would be too. Thank you, Steve and John. We really appreciate our weather guys being with us today. Thank you also to our team members, Clara Neipert, Joel Pattinaud, Lee Rayburn, and Jeff Roberts, and of course, Larry Mueller. I'm executive producer Jill Nadeau. Thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.